The British Imperial System evolved from thousands of different Roman, Celtic, Anglo-Saxon and customary local units employed in the Middle Ages. Traditional names such as pound, foot and gallon were widely used, but the values so designated varied with time, place, trade and product specifications, and dozens of other requirements. Early royal standards established to enforce uniformity took the name Winchester after the ancient capital of Britain, where the 10th century Saxon king, Edgar the Peaceable, kept a royal bushel measure and quite possibly others. 14th century statutes recorded a yard, perhaps originally based on a rod or a stick, of 3 feet, each foot containing 12 inches and each inch equaling the length of 3 barleycorns. The imperial system is a system used mostly by English-speaking countries of the world. Hi, this is Mikey, and in this video I shall try to shed some light on the imperial system of measurement. Distances are measured by using quantities or fractions of the basic unit, which is 1 foot. This simple unit of measurement was probably arrived at because most people have feet, and of course, even though no two people's feet are exactly the same, one grown man's feet are roughly the size as any other grown man's feet, about a size 10 in the UK. Even though a size 10 is only about 10.5 inches, when you put a boot on that foot, you will get to about the 12 inches you need to make up 1 foot. Advantages are that, to say for example that something is 12 feet long, a standard sized man would be able to measure this distance out with a reasonable degree of accuracy, give or take a bit, without needing a tape measure, because men have feet. How many men do you know who have millimeters? Maybe that's a question for the girls watching this video. A foot is divided into 12 inches. There may be many reasons why this is so, but lots of things originally came in 12s. 12 apostles, 12 hours of the day and 12 hours of the night, 12 days of Christmas, 12 months in a year, and so on. Although the system originally came from the Romans, it wasn't introduced to Britain until the invasion of the Normans in 1066. Another fact is that 12 is the first number to be given a special name of its own, a dozen. Other numbers to have their own names are 20, which is a score, and 144, which is a gross, which is 12 times 12. 12 is also very versatile in maths, being divisible by 2, 3, 4 and 6. An inch is then divided into smaller amounts by repeatedly dividing it by 2. So half an inch, quarter of an inch, eighth of an inch, 16th, 32nd, 64th and so on. Although after 64th it is more common to switch to hundredths of an inch and then thousands, because saying 256th or 512ths is a bit of a mouthful, and anyway, no one really uses anything much smaller than thousandths of an inch. In fact, a machine manufactured piece with a tolerance of only 1/1000th of an inch would be very accurate, and quite a normal tolerance would be 3 or 5 thousandths of an inch. Tolerance is the amount that the dimensions of a piece might vary in the manufacturing process, e.g. 1 foot, 1 inch, 1/4 of an inch, and plus or minus 3 thousandths, where 1 inverted comma is a symbol for a foot and 2 inverted commas is a symbol for an inch. An inch can also be divided into 3, so 1/3 of an inch, which is called a barleycorn, though this is not commonly used, and to be fair, I only discovered that whilst researching this video. So 36 barleycorns would be 1 foot. Inches can of course also be divided into tenths and further 20ths, although this is rarely used by native imperial users and seems to have come about by people wanting to metricize the imperial, which is a bit of a cop-out if you ask me. But it does have some advantages to know about, even though it can get a bit more confusing if you're not careful. For example, if someone says 3/10 and you measure 3/8, then your measurement will be wrong. Going the other way, going up, multiples of 3 feet are called a yard, so 10 yards would be 30 feet, and 5.5 yards, 16.5 feet, are a pole or rod. 40 poles are a furlong, which is a standard distance for measuring horse races, or multiples thereof. Also used when calculating area, but we can get into that a bit later. There are 220 yards in a furlong, and 8 furlongs make up 1 mile. So there are 1,760 yards, or 5,280 feet, in a mile. And if the reason for this doesn't seem perfectly obvious to you, then one story that I've heard is that a mile was supposed to be 1,000 steps of a Roman centurion. Mil, in Latin, means 1,000. Though he must have had quite long legs, because each step would be nearly 6 feet, and he couldn't have been wearing a tight pteryges at the time. A pteryges is the defensive skirt of leather or multi-layered fabric linen strips or lappets worn dependent from the waist of Roman and Greek cuirasses of warriors and soldiers, defending the hips and thighs. And as if you didn't know this already, there are 3 miles in a league. Another term is chain, which is the distance between the stumps, or wicket, which are the 3 wooden sticks at each end of the pitch in the English game of cricket, which is 22 yards. So 4 poles would be a chain, making 10 chains, 1 furlong. There is also the cubit, a measurement taken from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, usually rounded up down to 18 inches. The cubit is thought to have originated in ancient Egypt around 5,000 years ago. And of course, there is a different mile known as the Nautical Mile, which is a bit longer than a regular mile, coming in at about 1 1/6 of a normal mile, or 6,076 feet, or 225 yards. A nautical mile is based on the circumference of the Earth and is equal to 1 minute of latitude. So, if one was to cut the Earth in half at the equator and consider the equator as a circle, it can be divided into 360 degrees, and then each degree can be split into 60 minutes, of which 1 minute of arc equals 1 nautical mile, meaning that the circumference of the Earth at the equator is 21,600 nautical miles, or 24,901 regular miles. Then there is also the fathom, which is 2.026 yards, in practice 6 feet, or 1/1000th of a nautical mile, still used as a nautical standard around the world for measuring the depth of water. And then there is the cable, which is 100 fathoms, or 202 yards. When compared to the metric system, 1 inch is equal to 25.4 millimeters, and a yard is 91.44 centimeters, and a mile is 1.6 kilometers. Conversely, 1 millimeter is 1/25th of an inch, more or less. A meter is 3 feet 3 inches and 3/8 of an inch, give or take, and a kilometre is 5/8 of a mile, approximately. Right, so let's move on to area. Area in the imperial is measured in inches squared, or square inches, but there are some other terms. First, let's deal with inches. 1 inch times 1 inch is 1 square inch. Half of an inch times half of an inch is 1/4 square inch, and 1/4 of an inch times 1/4 of an inch is 1/16 square inch. Similarly, 1 foot times 1 foot is a square foot, or 144 square inches. But half a square foot times half a square foot is 36 inches squared. 1/4 of a foot times 1/4 of a foot is 1/16 of a foot, or 9 square inches. A yard times a yard is a square yard, or 9 square feet. Half a yard times half a yard is 2.25 square feet, and so it goes on. The next measurement up is a perch, which is 1 rod times 1 rod. So 5.5 yards times 5.5 yards is a square perch, or just a perch, which is 30 1/4 square feet. So let's not forget the square mile. 1 mile times 1 mile is 1 square mile. Half a mile times half a mile is 1/4 of a square mile. And 1/4 of a mile times 1/4 of a mile is 1/16 of a square mile. Moving up from there, a rood is a furlong times 1 rod, coming in at about 1,210 square yards, or 10,890 square feet. And a furlong times a chain is an acre. An acre is quite a common term for measuring land, which is 220 yards times 22 yards, which is 4,400 43,580 square yards, or 43,560 square feet. It's supposed to be the area that one man can plough in one day. So, a square inch is 645.16 millimeters squared. A square foot is 92,903 millimeters squared. A square yard is 0.83 of a meter squared. A perch is 25.29 meters squared. An acre is 404,608 meters squared. And a square mile is 2.25 square kilometers. So, let's move on to weights. Weight in the imperial system is measured using quantities or fractions of the basic unit, which is an ounce. As a unit of weight, the ounce derives from the Roman uncia, meaning 12th part, which was 1/12 of a Roman foot or ounce. The standard or physical embodiment of the Roman foot, a copper bar, constituted the Roman pound standard and was divided along its length into 12 equal parts, called unciae. But forget all that, because that is all just history. An ounce is then divided up by repeatedly dividing it by 2, as most things are in the imperial system. So, half an ounce, quarter, eighth, 1/16, and so on. 1/16 of an ounce is called a drachm. Similarly to distances, it's when we start going the other way that things start to get, well, complicated really. The next weight up is a pound. There are 16 ounces in a pound, not like the Roman pound where there are only 12 ounces. Although the abbreviation for pound is LB, which is short for libra, which is the Latin word for scales or balance. In mythology, a libra is related to the Greek goddess of justice, Themis, the Greek mythology version of Atalanta, meaning balanced, and Astrea, daughter of Themis, who went up to heaven and became the constellation of Virgo and carried the scales of justice, which is in the constellation Libra. The next weight up is a stone. There are 14 pounds in a stone, the same weight as a big stone, which could be found almost anywhere. Then 2 stones is equal to a quart, and 4 quarts are 100 weight, making 100 weight 112 pounds, or 8 big rocks. Well, what can you expect in a time when the lowest and most common form of currency was the egg? In the USA, this has been rounded down to 100 pounds, presumably to make it easier for them, and quite right too. No. In fact, the term stone is not really used in the USA, where they just stick to pounds, known as weights. So it makes sense, really. Next comes a ton, which is 20 hundredweight, or 2,240 pounds in the UK. In the USA, they have what is called the short ton, which is only 2,000 pounds. So, an ounce in metric is 28.3 grams. A pound is 0.45 kilos, or 450 grams. A stone is 6.3 kilos. A hundredweight is 50.8 kilos, and a ton is 1,016 kilos. So, moving on to volume. Liquid volumes are measured by using quantities or fractions of the basic unit, which is a pint, whereas volume in general is quantified by inch cubed, or feet or yards cubed. There are no quaint colloquial terms for measurements of volume. A pint is most commonly known as the basic measure which beer is sold in a public house or pub or bar, and also milk used to come in pints. If you require a smaller measure, then the pint is always divided by 2, and so you get half a pint and so on. But then a quarter of a pint is known as a gill, and a gill is further divided up, so half a gill, quarter gill, eighth of a gill. An eighth of a gill is a dram, although the only place where you will commonly hear the term dram is in Scotland, where a dram is a measure of whiskey or spirits, originally referring to 1/8 of a fluid ounce, or barely enough to wet the inside of your glass. In Scotland, there are additional sizes. Good old Scottish. There's a big gill, which is 1.5 gills, a wee gill, which is 3/4 of a gill, a wee half gill, which is 3/8 of a gill, and a nip, which is 1/4 of a gill. But as far as it goes, a dram is not a fixed amount, and in practice is whatever someone pours into your glass at the time, presumably depending on how much they like you or not. Also, of course, the UK pint and the US pint are different. the UK pint being slightly bigger at 20 fluid ounces rather than the US pint being 16 fluid ounces, even though the US fluid ounce is slightly bigger than the UK fluid ounce, because the US fluid ounce is based on 1 ounce of wine rather than 1 ounce of water. Wine is less dense than water due to its alcohol content, so you get a bit more for your weight. Going up from a pint, you get a quart at 2 pints and a gallon at 8 pints. Then a peck is 2 gallons, and 8 gallons is a bushel. 64 gallons is a quarter, not a quart. Though the last two terms refer more specifically to dry volumes such as seed or grain or hay or straw. Right, so to round it up, a fluid ounce is 28.41 millimeters. In the USA is 29.57 milliliters. A pint is 568 milliliters. In the USA, 473 milliliters. A gallon is 4,546 milliliters. In the USA, 3,785.4 milliliters. And that just about brings us to the end of this video. Well, I hope it's cleared up a few things about how to measure using the imperial system and some of the terminologies used. As always, I have been Mikey. You can check out more about the imperial system by clicking the link below this video and visit my blog, where at least it's all written down for you to see. And if you like this video, you know what to do. And if you didn't like it, you know what to do as well. And hopefully see you in the next one. Dun, 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 dun.